Hello, beautiful. I'm your host, Nicole Goff. Welcome to the Ecstatic Life Podcast, the podcast for women who want to live fully embodied, nervous system regulated, open hearted, radiant, and alive. Here we explore the practices, modalities, and lived rhythms that return you to yourself, to your heart, to your body, your intuition, and your divine spark. This podcast is for women who are ready to awaken their inner creatrix, activate their inner manifester, and remember, an ecstatic life isn't a destination. It's the path we're walking together. Hello, welcome back to the Ecstatic Life Podcast. I am your host, Nicole Goff, and today we are here with a special Q&A session, and I'm here with my sister from another mister, Cassandra Stevens, who is going to help assist me in answering this question, because the question that I got was honestly one that was not as familiar of a problem for me as maybe it has been for Cassandra, Cris, as I call her in her life. So I brought her on as a guest expert, so to say. So the question that I got from my community, and I will also preface this, if you would like us to answer any questions, I'm planning on doing a Q&A once a month. And so you can send your questions to me in the form of a direct message, either through Facebook or Instagram, or if you want to join my community, the Ecstatic Life Academy. Anybody who drops questions through the Ecstatic Life Academy will get first preference for this monthly Q&A, but I am at Nicole Desiree Goff, NicoleDesireeGoff on both Instagram and Facebook. So that's a great way to get in touch with me. Email is too slow. I get too many emails a day. So direct message is definitely the fastest way to get a question to me. So this month's question comes from one of my Ecstatic Life Academy members, and the question is this: how do you deal with a severed relationship with your own mother while trying to navigate motherhood? It's a point of great pain for me and one of the hardest things for me to move past. I am adopted, so there are many layers of feeling abandoned. And so before we get into answering that question, I did want to acknowledge the grief in this question. And so this one, I sat with this for a while to see, how I could honestly answer this and help facilitate healing through this. And again, this is why I brought on Cris, because I feel like this particular grief is much more at home, living in her body, as something that she has dealt with for her entire life. And so, Cris, if you want to go ahead and jump on, and maybe if you feel called to, you can express why this would be something that you would have knowledge in answering.
There's a lot of mental illness in my family. There's generations of abuse. I am an only child, and my parents stayed married to each other. They function well. They had maybe, I think, because they were supposed to. And my mother has dealt with resenting me pretty much from the time I was born, motherhood herself. And so that's how I came to know myself. And that's how I came to know motherhood. And it's so many things I use for reality testing and like forming. And when you have this kind of abandonment, you have this kind of betrayal trauma, and you kind of exist growing like this. A lot of the traditional stuff doesn't of being able to walk yourself out of these kind of separations and betrayals. And I really touched on the abandonment thing. I've been diagnosed borderline personality. The abandonment fear is you're like driven in the nervous system, driving you kind of irrational, irrelevant to that, like lived, like abandonment fear is something I'm very close to. The grief of all the misunderstandings, the looking for just like not even really getting to know myself as I was growing, because that's not how I belonged. in utility. And then ultimately having that also be the very source you go to for, in my case, everything that like I'm highly relational, relationships matter to me. I'm very sensitive to those things. You know, I've been blessed with the freedom to learn about other ideals and other ways and like perfectionism and the dysfunction, and to have spaces in the world at least to ask those questions. And so, you know, you can have a beautiful life and I can become a mother, and all of these things can still be really at the core of me and real, and something to the grief of learning the truth really helps me have compassion for how ridiculous living the lies has made my life.
Mm,
But there's so much grief. The grief, like the realizations can bring compassion. We can learn things that bring compassion and outside of these relationships. And then ultimately we lose these relationships. So for me, it wasn't, you know, there's been abandonment just outright. If you don't follow my order, you're dead to me. Kind of control biased a bit. And there's also freedom from that relationship, freedom from that, because in the relationship, it's based on abandonment in that way. So there's so much grief looking back and realizing what you thought was belonging was just desperately trying to fit in.
yeah.
And then that the betrayal is also entwined in how we've come to know ourselves and value ourselves and understand the world around us in life. A lot of
Yeah.
the come back to yourself stuff doesn't really make sense when we've gone through stuff like that, because it's like that is ourselves forming. That's kind of the thing about the chronic, you know, CPTSD kind of trauma. Is like I had to work to understand what having compassion for myself was like to actually experience, because as I was learning that that would make my life better, I still only understood it from the lens of like kind of this externalized performance bias, like this thing I have to do for me because it is the good thing, that because the pain is real and I'm clueless in it. I understand sitting with this.
Because
And
mother is the original source of the identity, and mother is that original source of bringing you into your nervous system, into your body, into your identity. And because whether that attachment is severed due to, you know, actual abandonment, adoption, a parent that is absent, or if in like in your case, it was really an emotional abandonment. Like maybe she was physically in the room, but your mom was never there. Yeah. And it's not something you can
yes.
really get over. It's not something you can just get over. And also, you know, going back to the question, how to navigate motherhood, this is something that I imagine gets triggered with every stage of motherhood, that this comes up over and over, a re-triggering of the loss, the grief, what you missed out on.
Well, so much of it to me for me too was like that relationship was still, and my reality bias and my reality testing was still ongoing when I first became a mother, and these realizations have come to me through motherhood. And so like learning about my, like actually feeling like that I do accept my children, and learning to love and value my children's own sovereignty has kind of led me in a backwards fashion to realizing that it is absent in my functioning inner world, that it has been disconnected in order to maintain like a bit of belonging there. And then it's hard to not get kind of to have these realizations about like a parent's capacity, because the way that it came to me was not my mother's capacity. It was my own tragedy. It was the devastation of injustice. You know, it was monstrous to look back on, even more than I would ever believe going through it that it was. And so that clarity is harsh. We talk about clarity all the time and how it leads to like the peace, but that particularity Maybe just whatever is our clarity is so harsh to deal with. So I know it's mine because it's harsh. It's harsh to look back on that. And then so it can be easy to fall into the like kind of looking for support from that, like, and we're so used to rigidity when we're in these abandonment fear relationships and so on and so forth. And there are primaries. And so reality testing is so heavily involved. How we know ourselves, how we know the world around us. It's a lot to then try to model for somebody else from through motherhood from
Mm.
such a broken like a still like questioning and broken and in confused place, and so that coming to that realization of this is my parents' own capacity. It wasn't even as personal as I have spent my entire formative years making it for me. That kind of abandonment, like having to go back and question reality itself
I can
because of what
imagine.
we've missed as children.
Yeah, and I can imagine the the forgiveness aspect, like not just the forgiveness of the parent who wasn't there, the parent who, and as you're saying, like, that is a very forgiving way to look at it. Like the forgiving, they weren't available for that. Your mother was not available for that for whatever reason, whatever programming, whatever, schisms, she was not
Stories
available
we
for
tell
that.
ourselves.
Yeah. And for a mother that decides to give her child up for adoption for whatever reason, they are not available for that experience. They are not available to be a mother. I mean, as as those in my community know, I've recently taken on my grandson. And so coming from the other side of this, my 19-year-old daughter now has, having a bit of a life crisis, and she was pregnant at a young age, pregnant in high school. And I was so proud of her for stepping up, and like she had a home birth and she breastfed him till he was 18 months old and co-slept and, all these things. And, at 2, even through all of that, she's finding herself in a position where she is choosing a different life, herself, a career, a social life, and the forgiveness that I have to find in myself for her in that, and the understanding, to hold her and to hold myself in that. And I can imagine, that in retrospect, looking back at your mom and finding that forgiveness, and your mom is still alive, she's still on this earth, for the woman who sent in the
Severed
question.
relationships. Yeah. Severed
Yeah.
relationships. Usually relationships sever with our living parents because of like the lens of control.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of grief there because it is who we are and we have to go back and we have to do that. I mean, like the short answer is truly reparenting ourselves, like
Mm-hmm.
holding space for ourselves. And the answer I had to that, because like that, um, initially, as I was learning about it, it sounds almost like like if you're gonna be on the spectrum and you're gonna take it literally, it almost sounds like to someone who's gone through that kind of severed relationship, where the relationship is dead with your living parent, and it's a part of you. Like the reparenting sounds kind of like a red nightmare, and that's not what it's meant to mean. So I had to like, this is where, what you're doing and what we're doing with that has actually led to me building the capacity that I use to handle this kind of like understanding of betrayal, the not getting into rigidity and what I know, and having space for growth and questioning and actually experiencing compassion for myself. Like it's just talking ain't doing. And I have learned that somatically being able to do actions in my body in the present moment to actually just create stillness and hold the space for this pain. And it's okay that it's like, it makes sense that it is a chronic pain. That I think the urge to move past it a lot of times is me feeling so small trying to contain it. and so afraid.
It's the process of grief when we have somebody that actually dies. And I'm not sure the person who sent in the question if their mother is still on the earth or not. I don't think that was clear in the question, but you know, when somebody dies, there's that grieving process that most people are allowing themselves to go through. But then allowing the grief, giving yourself permission to grieve the mother who just wasn't there or just isn't there. I feel like that is a very important aspect of this. So before the forgiveness, I just talked about forgiveness, but before the forgiveness, the allowing of that grief process and going through all those stages. And I mean, I don't know that you ever, you know, get over that the same way you never really get over the loss of someone who is very meaningful to you. But allowing, you know, that mourning to actually happen and not bypassing it, I could see would be extremely healing.
Yes. And it doesn't take forgiveness. It's not even forgiveness to realize this was their capacity. A lot of times when we have relationships through the lens of control that allows a parent to sever us, or we have to sever from the parent, which is also usually just they only want access, they only want to utilize us. So the connection is already severed. Like, whether they're coming for you and there's no boundaries and there's no emotion, there's nothing there. But they want a relationship and you're the one severing it, or whether they're like intolerant of you and have severed the relationship because, you are you. That's so when it's a parent, it's very much part of how you're formed. Then you add an extra dynamic about that by stepping into the role of motherhood yourself and then living as you are with your children and trying to facilitate their freedom to do so. Right. And so it's coming kind of from all of the angles. The relationship, it does seem kind of psychotic to grieve a living person when they're so formative to you, like a parent. But it takes grieving that close relationship, and that grief doesn't even have to come with like forgiveness necessarily, or like you can have peace for the lack of peace in our own hearts, is what I've kind of ultimately learned with. This is not empowering to say like, I choose this dysfunction and I'm part of this, but to move past it is to miss the pain can be our friend that lessens.
Yeah.
And that the discernment we weren't allowed to have in childhood or so on and so forth, that we need to call on now, our ability to have that. And so that's where the talking ain't doing really comes in, because the somatic work that I have learned and the somatic work that I can do is what is actually cultivating the space that allows me to have a container for an emotional body when in abandonment and and anxiety and like knowing myself through those roles was my only existence before.
Yeah. Well, and you talked
And
about reparenting. And so that, like, I can see that as being one of the hugest aspects of that. And even in my, my mother is still alive. I'm actually at her house right now, visiting her in North Carolina in the mountains. We still have a relationship, but I think every mother and daughter dyad has these sticky points, that has these growth points, that there is going to be some sort of conflict. So even in remothering myself through the things that I missed as a child, just due to my mom's personality, I mean, she was a great mom, but there were aspects of me that she didn't understand and that she rejected. And in reparenting myself, in learning how to integrate and to love those pieces that were rejected, has been super, super healing. And then the next step when talking about like, raising our children, it's like, how can you then take that and like become the mother that you wish you had had or that you needed? And then instead of passing on generational trauma, doing the opposite, turning it on its head and doing the opposite. Like, how can I show up for my child
with
in a,
receptivity,
yes, yeah.
including to the humility of failing. I think that's a point where a lot of abandonment issues happen between parents and children is I'll step into the ideal, but I won't let it's a role rigidity. And I won't let it affect. I won't be receptive to what is true when it counters that I've done that. So like mother is God in the eyes of a human child, like we were talking about. So we have those sticking points and there's either that cultivating that space to grow and understand that, or there is that controlling it, which really doesn't allow for that. So the pain and the grief and the awareness at that point, if we can do the work, even somatically, to allow ourselves to face these harsh misunderstandings, to not push ourselves into some forgiveness that ends up being just more self-betrayal.
Yes.
So understanding my own mother's capacity is a truer to reality and more peaceful awareness than the she hates me on purpose, like it's about me because it happened to me. It really allows to step out of that I've now found validation, but I'm in a victim role. And it's so how is it not my identity kind of thing while I'm reparenting. And it's not about the talking. It's not even about the story. If we can create that somatic cultivation in our bodies, then we can find a place to hold our own big and undesirable emotions.
I want to touch on two things that you just said. And the second is about somatic practices. But the first thing I want to touch on, you talked about the victimhood triangle, or you alluded to the victimhood triangle. And so I think that's a really, really important aspect of this, because when we create that victimhood triangle and we have the bad mommy or the bad daddy, or the villain in that villain role, and we put ourselves in that victim role, and then we're looking for the rescuer. A lot of times that's a partner or somebody to take the place of that role that we missed out on as a
That
child.
it's all externalization.
Yes. Yep.
So it causes not only pain, but desperation. And that's how you get the perpetuation generationally. Because
Yes.
then the driver becomes us. So I didn't understand reparenting because being driven like a cattle for my emotionally in order to perform growing up and self-abandoning like that was my MO. So to question it is good. And then to say, where is it all me and where is it not me is good. Yes. But like to stay in that triangle is definitely perpetual victim. You're staying in a role, which it's exactly what you're trying to live out of.
Yeah. But that's, to
It's
me,
so
is the hardest
external.
work.
It
Is
is
just
the hard,
stepping
but
out of
the
no
only way
matter
I've
what the
done it,
triangle consists of, stepping out of that role.
yes, the only way I've been able to like usually a lot of times that's true, but then also for children who have been chronically abused in the name of everything that is love and right, and then abandoned, which is often, so humans struggling with this, it's not special,
Yeah.
it can sometimes be the first thing that wasn't, because the self abandonment and self betrayal is kind of required to fit in with people who are willing to abandon you, who dismiss you based on their decided externalized worth, who a lot of times do that with their own souls, and that's why they can't leave or grow with you. It becomes not a sticking point, but an ending point. And so when you're living with that, and you love your children, but you're now capable of understanding that as normal, a lot of times the relating to any kind of victim role is the first time you self-validate instead of performing with self-abandon to avoid abandonment.
Well, so that leads me to the second part of that I wanted to touch on. So you've spoken multiple times about somatics and somatic work. And so what are the practices that have helped you? Because this is something I talked about, a ton on this podcast. And in my particular victim triangulation, mine had to do with, being raped and subsequently abused and sexually abused in a relationship. And so for me, like the somatic work, getting into the body, bypassing, the mental processes and things like ecstatic dance and other somatic practices, even yoga, breath work, getting into the body has really helped me to process a lot of that trauma that I didn't have words for. So what, from this particular lens, like what do you find is the most helpful?
I really love the EFT because it is something that I can do to create grounding, even with the chronic pain, the bigger. I used EFT before we got on because I really do have a deep seated fear of being seen. And am I going to cure it with a, thing? But like it allows me to actually do grounding when otherwise I'm like, the nervous system will not calm myself. Like the emotions are just going to be big and they're either with me. It actually allows me to do grounding to adjust that in its measure of overtaking my own awareness and create. That's what I've come to understand as reparenting. And like what I'm trying to do is I'm rebuilding self-trust instead of self-abandoning or staying in that space. And like I was saying, even the victim role becomes just more self-abandoning me because it's so what we're used to get along with people that are willing to treat us this way, fitting in and calling it belonging. So I need to build a practice of actually rebuilding self-trust from some space where it's like, that's not been my function before,
Showing
to
up
know
every single
myself.
day. And that's
Yes.
something I talk about all the time. It's that self-trust that I have me. I have my own back. My higher self has me. I will not abandon myself. Showing up for yourself consistently every single day sends that signal of safety to your body.
Yes. And so when the emotions are big, and it feels like they're driving you and you don't understand them, or that there's that reflection that needs growth, and there's that habit of like self-blame, or doing the rigidity stuff we know and have normalized kind of thing, like when it comes to mothers and how we don't ever want to make the same mistake, to live in that narrow reality and do that to our own children, or how do we end this? We create space to feel our own emotions with grounding in our body. That's what the reparenting and the adult self is for me, is instead of that child who is driven by so many emotions that like I'm willing to do anything, I become this grounded person able to sit in peace with the acceptance and then I spend time with myself. And then even though it's been very extreme for me historically too, like I'm able to actually hang with myself in stillness and then go forth with conscious action and less emotional underdrive, or it's that I get to be myself. I find a space for myself and I stop thinking those thoughts of how to trade self for what I love. Instead, there's a space for all of it cement, and no amount of talking is doing that. So that's been a huge shift for me. For me, that's been justice.
Do
Because
you
that
find
victim
that
role, it's like, well, if I'm not the one at fault and all of these things have blah, 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 and I don't, all that kind of thing, but there's the validation of not self-blaming, fine. You know, that's justice, is the somatic work, to just tell a better story, to take those better moments with your kids. Like it's not about moving past the pain. It's about empowering myself to realize I did not choose this. Like my full name is Cassandra. I did not choose this. And
Do
this
you find that
is,
it helps in community? Like, is that an aspect, like with bringing in like mentors or coaches or
yes.
people
So
people that
it's
can
really natural for us to look up and emulate then we end up emulating. And there's the crux with it's the broken childhood and motherhood. So we will emulate what we look up to and value. So then that's how very much how we end up acting like our mothers, our fathers, our parents. And so that's part of it. It's like once you find peace, and so you know how to sit and build self-trust one moment in the body at a time, one day at a time, one little. And that pain can be our friend. That's our conscience telling us that we don't want to end up like people who are willing to sever from their own children just to maintain any kind of anything at that, is that it's kind of hard to understand until it's happened to you. I think that's why I'm on here. And you can't just hang with this your own, even though everything you're doing is very much part of how to heal, period. No matter how bad it can get. Simply tell a better story, live in the moment, live for yourself, and it recultivates every time. But that friend is like part of your conscience. And a lot of times when we have parents who will abandon us like this, what they have is a huge conscience gap. And so they don't bring these feelings into their awareness. They don't accept this change. And they live at war with reality in a lot of ways at that point, like unwilling to face things or just done. And that the parent that's there but isn't there, right? When we're doing that, it's because something else is perpetuating us that's not this present moment.
Yeah.
So they'll live and die like that. So whether I forgive them or not, there's no justice in that. That's sad and it's tragic and it's hard to see people that you love and that have made you choose that fate. And I didn't choose this fate, yada, yada, yada. It's okay to validate things that I've been utilized to blame myself for and say, nah, where do I begin and someone else ends? And learn those kind of things with our children.
Yeah. I think that's really important for anybody in mothering too, because that can go the opposite way with losing yourself in your child, where I end and where they begin and what is their life.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of abuse and generational trauma and like missed tragic relationships is built on the very lovely intent of like not what happened specifically to me. And that's where that victim role comes in. If we stay there, there's going to be harm done. I've done it. I've done it too. I was a teen mom too. I've done it. I've done all that. If we stay there, and that is truly, and we love our child, we don't understand our own parent. Like in my case, I didn't understand my own mother. I'm like, this is awesome. Why do you hate everything about me? Because you're so lovely. There's nothing wrong with you. So there was not a lot of questioning until there was a lot of questioning. It's usually what happens when it kind of ends up being. But I've done a lot of that with my own daughter. I love you so much. And then I walk right into everything I know. And it's not about that. That's what I mean by referring to the somatic. It is about empowering the acceptance that, childhood to some degree is a hostage situation and we did not choose this. Sometimes empowerment is saying like, I choose this and I forgive this. And no, it's not like that. It's really just about sitting with the love of everything that we've learned that isn't and is in the same kind of daily basis and having an emotional containment. That's what somatic work does. That's what allows compassion to become a lived experience instead of a performed experience.
One of the things that I have been practicing, as you know, for the last few years is, taking radical responsibility. Like when I saw the victimhood triangle playing out in my life, particularly with my husband, with my patterning, and, a few years ago, I was like, oh, this has to stop. Taking radical responsibility. So when you look at it in this lens, when we're talking about this mother wound, this abandonment wound with your mother, there is a practice, and this is not just for someone who was abandoned or rejected by their mother, but for anybody, because as I said before, we all have to some degree something.
It takes a very long time for us to grow. And I think the idea of finding ourselves and allowing ourselves relative to our structural historical existence is newer. So even attempting to bring this into speech and then, like give it a language and then also to heal it and to give it our attention this way is that like we have a pretty long history of not knowing any better and never talking about
Yeah, what we're
it.
doing right now in our generation is definitely radical work. It's radical work. I think since we lost the tribe,
Yeah.
we lost that, and it was a lot of we just don't talk about it. Generation after generation after generation of just not talking about it. But that radical responsibility, it's like this is the reframe. Can you look at it and say, could this woman be the perfect mom that I needed in this life? What my soul chose in some way, right? To come in this body, into this life, to this mother, to be born to this mother. So, how can you reframe it to say, no matter what heinous, absolutely heartbreaking, horrible things she
What
might
can and
have done,
cannot be.
how could she be the exact perfect mother that I needed in this life? How could the lessons that I've learned through being born to this particular woman be the exact medicine my soul needed? And so that is
Mhm.
the most radically irresponsible thing that you can do.
That's the yeah, then that's the justice. And then no matter our story, our past story, even or every matter, or but not role rigidity, not external, but taking and creating the space for growth from within our story, our children's story, where our lifetimes, taking that on, having that opportunity, that's justice. And a lot of times when I say things like it's their capacity. So it's not personal to me. A lot of times that victimhood requires like, look what they did that harmed me. It makes the harm like the story. But it's actually it's it's part of it.
Yeah,
There
it can be the
it
starting
doesn't
point
mean what we
for the
usually
growth.
grow up. Yeah, we don't it doesn't usually, mean what we end up thinking it means or being harmed.
Mhm.
So there's a reframing to that. It's not as important. And truthfully, like it was just someone else's capacity. It's just, oh, so where's my capacity? And
And how do you grow that capacity?
exactly, somatic.
Yeah.
No matter your story, talking ain't doing. It really does make the difference. It makes the difference in my drives, not just my emotions, but my drives to act on that desire to do better for my children holistically instead of just from that place of moving past it perpetually. Like, and I'm not saying that the person questioning is like, but there is such a danger and it's so confusing at times. And somatic, tell a better story today. Tell it
Yeah.
inside your own body, and repairing is rebuilding self-trust. It's not connecting to something, the better than, because it actually is. Sometimes it hasn't even formed in me. There are things that all the coulda, shoulda, woulda happened at 8 that are happening at 40. Um, so like it doesn't matter what is the exact right medicine. Like it act on it.
Well, you brought up EFT as one of the best healing modalities for you. And so that's something that I have been in the EFT tapping course, the Expand method. I'm going to be getting certification in that. So the Expand method is actually taking for the last year I've been doing. This has been really amazing, and I brought that to our group, to the Ecstatic Life Academy. But you can create scripts, and this is something I do for my clients. You can create scripts for these specific, hard, difficult things that we're going through, and you can work on tapping. There's the tapping to release, to forgive. There's also the tapping for expansion. So there's different patterns that you can do. There's different scripts that can be created. And this is something that I do with my clients and that we do. I do tutorials inside of our Ecstatic Life Academy group, but you can really specify it to your exact situation. I'm trying to be careful with my language because I have a predicament, hardship, to try to
You can use it to
reframe.
get really, really, really fine about reframing
Mhm.
our lenses.
Yep.
And that is really awesome. You can also use it for the preborn feelings that are chronic and just too big. Like you don't need any script to do EFT, I found sometimes, like getting into it too. I like the being able to do the scripts and the cultivation and the but like just going through the meridians and grounding oneself out with an emotion that someone is going to sit with rather than act from, and just allow yourself to feel it, and it grounds with it's not as an anxiety, it moves past that and then it moves through you with or me without me perpetuating or acting from it as is in me. It
Yeah.
allows me to feel something instead of being driven by it, even when I don't know its name and I have no words.
Yeah. I did this past weekend, I did an ecstatic dance that had the purpose was for a cathartic release. It was called Dancing with Your Shadow. And so we had like pool noodles and pillows that you could like hit, punch, like hit things, drums. I had a lot of drums that you could hit. And the playlist was designed to specifically stir up your emotions in a way. Kind of some songs were kind of grating, some songs were really harsh, but it moved through all the emotions and it moved, through grief and through anger, and then it brought you down. And in the end, I intentionally brought you down into a meditative state where I did a guided meditation to meet your shadow parts. And so parts work is another modality that I found that can be very helpful with these kinds of situations. And so getting inside to meet those parts that maybe say, I am unlovable. When you've been abandoned, there is probably a little baby or a little childhood part that lives inside of you that thinks I am unlovable. This is my fault. And so getting in there and meeting these parts, there's probably an angry part too, that, is just like maybe the angry teenager part that's still living inside of you. That's just like, fuck all authority, fuck parents, fuck caregivers. They're not here for you. So going inside and No Bad Parts is a really good book on this, but parts work is getting in there and getting to know these inner parts, these childhood usually parts, and not to reject them or push them out, but to integrate them. So the
Mhm.
integration is acceptance and understanding, and then reparenting those individual parts. And this could be pre-verbal parts, or like I said, all the way up to parts that are like, that rebellious teenager. And it's like, yes, I see you and I understand why you did what you did, why you do what you do, why this part of me comes out, whether it's in my parenting or in my relationships, or maybe it's, in my friendships, having a hard time with friendships with other women, and so saying like, oh, I see you, little 8-year-old part of me that wanted nothing more than to, spend the summer with her mother on the beach, like I saw my friends doing, and now rejects other women or, whatever. I mean, obviously that's just a made up story that I just, that's not one
Yeah,
of my,
I
but
see.
getting to know
Yeah.
these little parts.
There's also internal family systems that part works is part of that. So you do the internal and then also you can like branch it out to see how like the dysfunction functions.
Yep.
And then so it gives us the ability to have some really good questions we would like to ask ourselves, which of course in family systems, usually if they're really you've asked not a lot of questions. Um, but like it allows us to actually get to know the role that we had to be instead of all of those things.
Yeah.
And so like and come to terms with that choosing.
And there are family constellation groups. I don't know of any locally here in our area. I know there's one in Miami, but all over the world, all over the country, all over the world, there are these family constellations that you can get together in person with a group of other people, and they play these roles for you. And it's kind of like acting it out in order to deal with it. So
Mm-hmm.
you if you're the one, doing the constellation, and you're in the center, and then you have actual real people in the room that act as these different parts. I haven't gotten to experience one of those because, as I said, there's not been one nearby, but that's something I'd really love to participate in. But that's another thing that can be very, very helpful in these kinds of situations.
Yes, and like from anywhere, I would like to give a shout out to Whitney Goodman. She has a podcast called Calling Home, and she has a like community she runs. You were talking about communities, and so it's like nobody wants, like, you don't want to go into the community of like when it's part of it, but when you want to have your own space to grow with these kind of things and ask community questions for how do you deal with being healthy with yourself, healthy as a mother, and healthy with difficult parents, one way or the other. That is a really good resource.
Hmm.
Like talking wise, and for community for this, if you need that extra support because you don't want to go into your mom's group and bring separation identity crisis to the table as what y'all are doing there necessarily.
Not only that, but
I
most
love your
women,
space here.
yeah, most women have the connection like through complaint aspect to like, so you want to make sure like you're surrounding yourself with people who are of that like growth and expansion mindset, who are owning their shit, who are taking accountability, who aren't in that victimhood mentality. Because if you're around a bunch of other people that are still in that victimhood mentality, you're going to be doing the opposite.
Yeah, you
And
won't find that, I think, at the Family Cycle Breakers Club. There's just extra support for for maybe that's who your parent is forever. They're gonna,
yeah, maybe we can link that. Shoot me a message after this, Cris, and we can link that as a resource in the show notes. I'll also link to our group, the Ecstatic Life Academy, and that's a good resource for the somatic work.
that so be receptive to our children, not enabling, totally receptive to our children, because they will give us some great feedback on what you're living through as a mom that they're not having to live through as a female, like how it's different and how it's the same. Don't expect like a generational past of your choosing because it would be so much more wholesome in any way. Like, let's come from where we are. And somatic work really builds the capacity for the love and compassion it takes to do that and make change.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I feel like
And
that's
your kids will let you know
yeah.
about the changes that are and are not happening.
Yes, they will, for better or for
Yeah.
worse. They're honest and reflective of our parenting.
Yes.
Oh, well, I feel like that's a good place to wrap up. But Cris, is there anything else you feel called to share? I feel like we did a
And a
good job
lot.
answering. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we did a good job answering that question. And I really appreciate your insight. Again, as I said, like I knew like when I got that question, I was like, oh, because I've known you most of our lives, I'm like, oh, this is one that would definitely could use your nuance. So I really appreciate you coming on and helping with that, and your vulnerability in sharing your own story and how that affected you. And yeah, I feel like it's going to be
We don't
really,
move past it. It's like there's that question like, when is the healing done to certain things that are hard to heal, right?
yeah,
Or painful to heal. And I was taught when I was younger, every day this side of the dirt, as in no matter what shitty thing is happening to you, you better be grateful for it. And I have reframed that to answering the question, when do I get to be done? You know, there's rest, and there's play, and then there's the other side of the dirt. And that's what we get to be done with those things. So we can embrace them, even when they are icky and hard.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for appearing on my podcast. I really appreciate that. And if anybody wants to submit any questions, like I said, hop on over to my social media, Ray Goff, and submit them there, or better yet, join Ecstatic Life Academy and become part of our little healing group on there. So
Touch grass.
yes.
Put your feet on the ground, dance ecstatically, build that
Breathe.
capacity. Breathe. Find all different kinds of ways to dance, breathing, meditate.
Yeah.
Meditate on
human
a
stuff.
like find that inner resource. It's within us.
Yeah. All right. I love you, Cris.
I love you too.
Want to dance with me? Go deeper with me? Have me in your back pocket, literally? Join the Ecstatic Life Academy on the Go Collab app. Link in show notes.